We are live via this webinar, and you have the YouTube live on as well, Travis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first I want to do a roll call of members.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Here.
Commissioner Levitt.
Here.
Here.
Commissioner Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Gragnani.
Here.
Commissioner Beatty.
Here.
Commissioner Depler.
Here.
Commissioner Simpson. Chair Lee.
Present.
Councilmember Werther.
Present.
Mayor Boland.
Here.
So on tonight's hearing, we have 3 public hearing items and 1 old business item that we want to deal with. So I will open the floor for public comment session. Does the department have any opening remarks, I guess?
Mr. Lee, if we could we do the approval of the minutes?
Oh, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes from last week?
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Helfrey and a second from Commissioner Beatty. All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Lee, excuse me. The motion was from Ms. Depler.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was watching fingers.
I'm not making a second.
Okay, so
There's I found an error in the motion in the minutes.
okay, go ahead and correct that.
Okay, on page 2, about under public hearings, about halfway down, it says a motion was made by Commissioner Gragnani and seconded by Commissioner Helfrey, and that's reversed.
Okay.
And that's it.
Joe, do you have that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll go back and I have a motion from Commissioner Depler, second by Commissioner Beatty with the correction by Commissioner Helfrey. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
One abstain. Sorry. One
Um,
abstain.
Councilman Werther abstains. So Joe, that passes.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so we'll move on to the public comment session.
Mr. Chair, if I could beg on your time a bit. Mr. Newberry and I would like to comment on a couple of items.
Okay,
Well, first of
Mr.
all, thank
Boonage.
you all for joining the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting tonight in this particular manner. We do appreciate it very much. As you know, it's a new experience for all of us. So we're expecting some bumps in the road or glitches, but we'll do our very best. Kathy, Travis, Sam, who's on the video conference but not visible, Julian, who is also on the video conference but not visible, and others. So we'll do the best we can. Just as I say, we're expecting something to go wrong. If you have a question, if something isn't clear, there is no hurry. We have all night to get through the 3 public hearings and the 1 action item. So just raise your hand, shout it out, do whatever's necessary to get our attention, and we'll take the time to answer your questions. For those that are watching from home tonight, the public, there are 3 public hearings, but as with any public hearing, the City of Wildwood will take no action tonight. So if you have questions, if you have comments, or something was missed because of the video process, just contact Mr. Newberry or myself, and we'll be glad to make sure that the commission is aware of your comment, question, or concern. Suffice to say, getting here tonight took a lot of effort on all of your parts, but I do want to acknowledge Sam Anselm, our city administrator, Julian Jacquin, our economic development manager, Travis Newberry, who's here tonight, and Kathy Arnett, who is our host and trying to manage this three-ring circus. I also want to acknowledge our officer, Steve, who is here tonight in attendance and helping out, and Mr. Young, our city attorney, who is also in attendance. We'll get through this together tonight, and as well as what it is out there in the future. So again, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, with your permission, Mr. Newberry is going to give a quick run through about how to raise your hand, how to chat, how to do this, how to do that, and hopefully it'll be a nice refresher for you before we get underway.
Thank you, Mr. Bunich. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a brief slideshow presentation outlining the different features that the participants will need to know about to participate in tonight's meeting. This is a meeting I had with myself earlier, screenshot, and this red circle is the participants tab. If you click that tab, this screen will show. This shows the participants that are in the meeting. Again, this was an earlier meeting. And then at the very bottom of the screen, you can raise your hand. When you raise your hand, a small blue hand will appear next to your name in the participant window, as well as on your video if you're on video for the commission members. Kathy Arnett will be monitoring the raise hand feature. Please raise your hand if you would like to address the commission for the public comment session or any of the 3 public hearings, and we'll have your name called and enable you to address the commission. The next feature that you need to know about is the chat window, and it's this icon circled in red. If you click on that, you're able to chat, and we have it set to where you can only chat with the panelists, which are the Planning and Zoning Commission members and city staff that are here moderating and participating in tonight's meeting. So if you have a question of the staff on how you can participate or which item you'd like to participate on, you can send it in the chat here. And again, Kathy will make note and we will call your name at the appropriate time. And if you chat, it appears like that, just so you know. And then whenever you're ready to leave the meeting, and you can leave at any time, or you can stay till the end, the red leave meeting text at the bottom right-hand corner will get you out of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for tonight. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry.
Thank you.
All right, so it looks like I have 22 participants. That means we have some people on board with us here. Are there any public comments before we start?
Mr. Lee, Kathy has said that there are no public comments submitted yet.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to the public hearing. I'll go ahead and read the public hearing script. In the city of Wildwood, public hearings are truly intended to accept comments and questions concerning these items. Since this is a public hearing, it is only intended to provide information on these requests. No action is planned on these items tonight, and consideration of them is to be taken no earlier than May 4th, 2020. City's Department of Planning will address the comments, questions, and concerns that are raised tonight and include them as part of their formal recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Public hearings are conducted as described in the handout provided on the table in the reception area, along with information on these matters. The Commission will allow all parties adequate time to present their position and ask that you respect all opinions by other speakers and avoid interrupting anyone during their time at the podium, or in this case, online. Anyone wanting to speak or receive future information on these items should fill out a speaker's card and leave it with Mr. Newberry. In addition, the information on the items can be found at the city's website at www.cityofwildwood.com. Commission would like to thank you for your cooperation and participation in tonight's hearings. Mr. Newberry, you read the first item.
Yes, sir. PZ 2-20, Matthew and Sandra Witt, 5 Monarch Hill Court, Wildwood, Missouri 63005, care of Sun Solar, Erica Irwin, 2531 North Patterson Avenue, Springfield, Missouri 65803. A request for a conditional use permit, CUP, in the NU non-urban residence district. Street address 5 Monarch Hill Court, locator number 19X640135, for the installation of ground-mounted solar panels upon this 3.89 parcel of land, which is located on the west side of Monarch Hill Court, north of Wild Horse Creek Road. This request is to be reviewed in accordance with Chapter 415.090 NU non-urban residence district regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, which establishes standards and requirements for the installation of solar panels. The requested permit is required due to the proposed solar panels being of a ground-mounted design type, Ward 6.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Bunich.
Before beginning the public hearing portion of this particular request, the Department of Planning would like to look into the official record regarding the matter, the city's charter, the city's master plan, Chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood, which is its zoning ordinance, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular petition, and any and all evidence presented as part of tonight's public hearing.
Great. You want to continue, Joe? I'm sorry.
I believe Mr. Newberry has a slide
Presentation,
presentation
okay.
that he's going to provide at this time. What we'll do is go into screen share, and you should see it on all of your monitors. Thank you.
Mr. Newberry.
Is everybody seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, looks good.
Thank you. So this is an aerial shot of the subject property, 5 Monarch Hill Court. You can see the lot is a diamond shape, and Monarch Hill Drive runs north-south down to Wild Horse Creek Road, and Monarch Hill Court runs along the southern boundary of the subject site. This is a zoomed in aerial shot of the property with the house to the east, the southeast corner of the lot. And I'd just like to draw your attention to the clearing here, which I'll have photographs and will relate to the proposed placement of the ground-mounted solar panels. This is a plan sheet of the proposed location of the solar panel, again, ground-mounted. And I'm going to flip back to the previous photo just so you can correlate the two. And then just a few photographs. This is of the cleared area that you could see on the aerial shot taken from Monarch Hill Court, which is again the road that runs along the southern boundary of the site. This is standing at Mr. Witt's driveway looking to the north, the home behind that large tree, and then his parking area to the right there. It's a little out of order. This is, sorry about that. This is another photo taken from Monarch Hill Court, looking towards the driveway area that leads from the clearing to the house. And this is sorry about the order of the photographs. This is another photo of standing at the driveway looking to the north. These photos are just photos taken from, from Monarch Hill Drive, the road that runs north and south. The intent of the photos is just to show the extent of the tree cover between this roadway and the proposed location of the ground mounted solar. And then this is standing at the bottom corner, the south corner of the lot, looking again towards Mr. Witt's property. And this is just a plan sheet of the proposed array and its dimensions. And I'll go back to the plan sheet, and that concludes the presentation.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Do I have anybody online that wants to speak on this issue?
I don't believe so. We haven't gotten a hand raised or a comment. Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gagnani.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Greg Nani, or Council Member Greg Nani.
No, that's my husband.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I'd like to make a correction before you go much further. And Mr. Newberry's reading, I believe he called that Ward 6. I believe Monarch Hill Drive and Court are in Ward 1.
That is correct, sir. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Okay. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, I would like to, not finding, raise your hand on here.
No, it's all right. I can see. Commissioner Greg Nani.
The picture that was shown, that Mr. Newberry showed of the, where that there's a kind of a driveway that goes into this cleared area. Not on the plan, but was an actual photo that he took right there. Is that array going to be far enough back in that clearing that it will not necessarily be at least totally visible from as you come up the drive, come up Monarch Hill Court and go past this little driveway?
Ms. Gragnani, the department believes that the placement of the ground-mounted solar panels at this particular location will not be visible from any of the adjoining roadways or abutting properties. Between topography and the existing woodlands, this location, if there is a choice, would probably be the best on the subject site.
Well, I was out there yesterday and I would agree with that. I just didn't know exactly where it was going to be. And it looked like it was going to be pretty far back there. So I wanted to make fairly certain that it's not going to be, you know, towards the house, which would, I guess, be towards the east, far enough that, you know, you could get a good look at it going when the people that live further back on Monarch Hill Court drive back there. So if that's the case, that was my only question.
Mr. Newberry, could you put the plan back up?
Couple of seconds here.
Yeah. So the road that you're looking at there, where is that in plan view and which direction are we viewing the photo?
The photo's taken looking to the north. The driveways doesn't show on the plan, but I can navigate back to the aerial. This is where I was standing, if you can see
Okay.
my cursor.
So where are the actual panels going to be mounted? In this view here, where the pond is?
It's not a pond, it's just a grassy area.
It's a grassy, okay, knoll. So they're going to put them back there then in the middle of the site? Fairly close.
Yeah, excuse me, but that was my question, whether it was going to be up here in this area where the shed is, or is it going to be way down there in that grassy area, I guess is what it is.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Gragnani, what we can do is ask the solar panel provider to overlay the location of the ground mounted panels onto an aerial photograph such as this. And that way we'll get an exact location.
That would be very helpful because it's, I mean, that's even further downhill. So you obviously wouldn't be able to see it if it's in that really flat grassy area.
That's probably the only place they can put that and not have shadow on the actual panels themselves. So it's be my guess they'd put it right in the center of the site, but that's something we would need on the presentation, the formal presentation from staff.
Yes, and we'll get it as quickly as we can for the commission members and provide it to you. And then as part of the recommendation process, you'll have that available to assist.
I have one other question.
Commissioner Gragnani.
Yes. Do we know if, I have not seen anything in regards to subdivision association and any okey dokey from such in terms of putting this in?
Ms. Gragnani, I'll defer to Mr. Newberry, but there was nothing in the packet of information indicating that they had received it. Some of these older 3-acre subdivisions don't have associations, but just roadway maintenance associations. And so that's another thing we'll find out for the commission.
Okay, I mean, I understand that that's could be the situation, but just so that we're checking to make sure that it's not necessary. Thank you.
Well, and again, Commissioner Gragnani, that's a condition of the conditional use permit process typically. So we'll make sure that we have it prior to presenting any recommendation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Thank you. I have just, I also wanted to know about the trustee approval. I also wanted to know with the placement of this, it looks to me that that clearing on all sides is, has trees around it. And so is this going to become an issue later on when the trees grow, that they're going to want to cut down trees to, in order to not have these solar panels blocked? And how large of an array is this going to be? So those are my questions. Thank you.
To answer your first question, Commissioner Helfrey, the department believes that the provider of the solar panels will take into account the shadow effect, as I believe Chair Lee described it when recommending a placement. And certainly we'll make sure that if there is woodlands in the area, they are preserved to the greatest extent possible. We can do that through the conditional use permit process. And in terms of the size, as you can see from the diagram Mr. Newberry's placed on the screens, it's about 45 feet in width. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to have to assess that if there's 6 of them equating to 45 feet, they're about 7 feet in. So roughly, let's say 45 by 35.
Yeah.
We'll get that exact measurement for you.
I would like to see it drawn, you know, put in place on the schematics when next time they come in front of us to see where it is, how big it is, and to ensure the trees don't become a problem down the road.
And again, with the permission of the chair, typically these questions could have been answered by the petitioner or the petitioner's representative. I guess given this format, we don't have them available to respond. So we'll make sure we get those answers for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vunich, I have one other item, and I would like to know what the height of the equipment will be off the grade. So when you bring this back, we can understand if we're 15 feet in the air or 6 feet in the air.
Consider it done, sir.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll summarize. We need to place the actual ground-mounted solar array on an aerial photograph to ensure its exact placement. We need to check on the subdivision association. We need the exact measurements of the array. And then finally, the height of the array relative to finished grade. Does that capture everything that's been asked to date?
I think so.
Neighborhood Association, was that on there?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, we can actually close this public hearing. I will take a motion. Commissioner Helfrey, motion. I need a second. Commissioner Cohn. It's okay, Commissioner Beatty, you were just a little bit slower than Commissioner Cohn. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We'll move on to the second public hearing, which is another solar PZ 2-20. Or no, wait a minute, that's what we just did. I'm sorry. PZ 5-20 Wildwood Family YMCA.
PZ 5-20 2540 Wildwood Family YMCA, care of Tim Peters, Executive Director, Wildwood Family YMCA, 2641 State Route 109, Wildwood, Missouri 63040. A request for a change in zoning from the NU non-urban residence district with an amended conditional use permit to the C8 planned commercial district upon a 9.34 acre tract of land, which is located on the west side of State Route 109, south of New College Avenue. St. Louis County locator numbers 24V410198 and 24V410187. Street addresses 2633 and 2641 State Route 109. The subject property is designated Cultural Institutional Overlay District under the current Town Center Regulating Plan. Proposed use: maintain the current not-for-profit recreational land use with associated parking and related accessory activities, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
New face on the screen, that is Tim Peters, the Executive Director of the Wildwood Family YMCA. He is now a panelist and will be able to comment and address any of your questions, concerns, or comments. And so welcome, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, given the unique format of tonight's meeting and the public hearing, the Department of Planning, Mr. Newberry and I took an unusual step in that we prepared a report, so to speak, on this particular matter, giving background regarding the Wildwood Family YMCA, how it initially was presented to the city of Wildwood back in 1999, the expansion that occurred to accommodate greater parking, and then subsequently the increase in membership over the years, making it a very popular community facility and certainly an integral part of town center. The department undertook this so that those that could not attend in the public would have the availability of a roadmap, so to speak, describing the information we know and the rationales behind the request, which came forward in discussions between Mr. Peters and the Department of Planning. And so tonight you have a little bit more information than typically at the start of a public hearing process. And from that perspective, the department just wants to identify a few items from the slides that are being presented by Mr. Newberry now on your screens. The Wildwood Family YMCA site is identified in the blue shaded area on this particular aerial photograph. It is a unique site in that it has 3 roadway frontages: State Route 109, New College Avenue, and Generations Drive. That is of particular interest tonight because since the YMCA exists as a conditional use in the NU non-urban resident district, those 3 frontages create 50-foot setbacks on 3 of the 4 boundary lines of the property. And as you know, those 50-foot setback distances associated with that residential zoning district are the greatest in all of our zoning district designations within the zoning ordinance. This particular property was not part of Town Center when originally presented to Wildwood for the conditional use permit. It was in an area that was non-urban residential and intended, for all intents and purposes, to have an institutional use like the YMCA or residential development or something other than commercial. When the cultural institutional overlay district was added to the regulating plan of the Town Center plan, this particular site was one that was included in that overlay district and became part of Town Center. And as you can see, the original site of the YMCA building was not as large in area as it is today. The YMCA purchased 3 acres immediately to the north of its facility and created additional parking there, again, based upon the success of membership drives and the interest by Wildwood residents in this type of facility here in Town Center. Tonight, Mr. Peters is presenting this request, so to speak, to allow for the property to more reflect its location in the Town Center and within the cultural institutional overlay district. Once part of Town Center, non-urban resident district zoning is not typically what the plan calls for. And in this case, the C8 plan commercial district will accommodate all existing improvements on the site. And as noted in the report the department provided for the public hearing, will eliminate some of the more restrictive setback requirements and allow a greater flexibility in the future for the YMCA if it should proceed with any expansions. The Town Center accommodates what is being requested. The site has a very restrictive set of requirements associated with it in terms of use, and the increased flexibility, I believe, as the director of the Department of Planning, will ultimately ensure that the YMCA building and the facility succeed well into the future for residents of Wildwood and others. So again, a bit of a long explanation. I appreciate your attention. And at this time, I'm turning it back over to the chair if there's questions of the department. And again, Mr. Peters, the executive director, is available to answer questions and respond to comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open it up for any questions, or we can let Mr. Peters present. Mayor Bowen.
So I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mr. Peters and potentially Joe. One of the things that I think is so good about this property is the fact that it has been a perfect example, near perfect example as to how to, I'm sorry, I think I was muted there. This is a question for Mr. Peters, and the background is one of the things relative to the YMCA property that I think is appreciated by our residents is the fact that it is one of the really good examples as to how to build something and preserve our green space, the trees, specifically, and there are several aspects of the YMCA property that represents this, but one of the most visible, of course, is the area that is between Highway 109 and the parking places where the old growth, we call them grand trees, were preserved. And so my question with that background in mind is there anything about the approval of this in terms of the YMCA's plans that will remove that feature of this property? Or is it the intent that that remain in place going forward?
Thank you, Mayor. Right now, there's we're in the extremely early beginnings of potential expansion talk. But from what we've looked at, there would be no removal of trees on the parking lot or anything like that. If I may just talk a little bit about what, when I started this conversation with Mr. Vunich and Mr. Newberry, what we were looking at doing, it started with our community garden and the importance of what we want to do moving forward with the garden, not just for our members, but for the entire community. One of those things that we're looking at doing is we've started some initial talks with potential donors about a state-of-the-art classroom. This past year, we received two $10,000 grants. And one of the things that one of those grants is going to be used to build is a sensory therapy garden. And the other part of that grant is going to be used to build some ADA beds. We've got some Eagle Scouts interested in building the beds. They've kind of started on that project. And we've had, like I said, some very early discussions on the potential of a state-of-the-art outdoor classroom that will allow programming for the gardeners, the community, and everything. You know, in this current state of where we're at with COVID-19, I was reading something the other day that gardening is now just skyrocketed, and what a better place to draw in our community than our very own community garden. But where we want to go right now with the setbacks and all that, we can't get there. From that spiraled into talks of potential expansion. So those were some of the early conversations we've had with Mr. Vunich, because obviously the 50-foot setbacks were of serious concern. There's no way we can move forward with anything in the garden without having the seal.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Mr. Newberry, could you point out on your screen where this would occur based on discussions and the 50, roughly give us a scale of the 50-foot setback?
I believe I shared my screen that shows the preliminary plans for the community garden. This is the existing building here, and then to the north of it is where the garden is shown. Setback line is this dashed line here and here.
Okay. That would be the proposed or the existing 50-foot setback, because it looks a little closer on the south side.
Mr. Chair, if I could
Yes,
add
Mr.
a
Rich.
comment or two. The setback line that Mr. Newberry showed on the south side of the property is a 30-foot distance. So very astute in your catching it. That is, for all intents and purposes, the rear yard area of the property. It does not have a common boundary with any roadway right-of-way. The location of the proposed classroom facility, the state-of-the-art classroom, is the former location of the packaged treatment plant for wastewater. Ultimately, public sewers were extended to this area. The plant was removed, and now that area could be used for expansion purposes, but is unable to be used fully due to that 50-foot setback from Generations Drive.
The lines going through the proposed classroom building from what we're seeing on the screen.
Generally speaking.
Yeah, so there are probably very few trees in that area, which would answer Mayor Boland's question.
Yes, as you can see on the aerial photograph that Mr. Newberry just shared, that white area, if he could put his pointer on it, that's where the former treatment plant was located. And there are very few trees in that vicinity.
Mhm. Mayor Boland, does that answer your question?
So, let's see here. Yes, it does. My concern was principally with the frontage of between the YMCA and its parking area, current parking area, where the arrow is pointing now, that the area between that and Highway 109.
So we're on the southwest corner of the site is where the classroom and the gardens are
Correct.
going to be proposed.
Different spot.
Mhm. Mr. Peters, do you have any other comments you want to make while we have you on the?
I just want to thank you all for your time. Obviously, I'd love to be there in person. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this virtually, so we can do our cause to curb this pandemic down.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments or concerns, discussion points on this topic? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close this portion of the public hearing.
Mr. Lee, before we have that motion and second and vote, are there any public comments? We're waiting to see. Hold on, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure.
Sorry about that. There are no public comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing. Councilman Werther, need a second. Oh, I can't second it. Come on, people.
I'll second. Helfrey will second.
Okay. Commissioner Helfrey, second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Mr. Peters, for attending our meeting.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
You too, sir.
Mr. Newberry, will you read PZ 3-20 City of Wildwood zoning primer?
Yes, sir. PZ 3-20, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission. Care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request to consider the development of new legislation to possibly be included within Chapter 415 zoning ordinance of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood relating to properties that are located within the City of Wildwood that present unique histories of use or character which must be considered needing greater scrutiny and protections due to their environmental legacies, site, soil, and or physical characteristics or proximity to a stream, creek, or ephemeral drainage ways that ultimately presents a higher than acceptable risk to the public if they are to be disturbed, developed, and placed into active use. Such situations necessitate the need for the consideration of a new special procedures overlay district with associated regulations that provides a minimum level of protections to all parties that are assessed as necessary while ensuring a thorough and complete review and comment period for the community, all wards. This hearing was held open from its original posting of March 16, 2020 to allow additional comments and suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Did we receive any additional comments as we left this open?
Mr. Chair, the Department of Planning has not received any comments via Action Center on website, nor any other written or verbal comments. I would note that the primer was reissued and updated to reflect your suggested addition to the list of 11, now 12 items, and that relates to the land disturbance permit process of the state of Missouri.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Newberry, or Mr. Vunich, I'm sorry, do you want to present further or?
Just have a brief comment or two, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, as was read into the record, this particular item was first posted for hearing on March 16th, 2020. Over the past 3 weeks, we have left the matter open for comment. If there are no additional comments from the commission members, we would request that the hearing be closed, and Mr. Young, Mr. Newberry, and I will begin the process of developing what we believe may be an appropriate approach to a new overlay district to provide the city greater scrutiny and control of sites that exhibit
the characteristics described.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Any comments or a motion?
I move to close the hearing.
Motion by Mayor Boland to close. I need a second.
I'll second.
Commissioner Beatty, second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, abstentions. Public hearing will be closed. Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
again,
Vunich.
all.
All right, moving on. We have one old business item, letter of recommendation. Mr. Newberry.
PB 11-19, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request to review section 415.030 definitions, section 415.400 sign regulations general, section 415.410 sign regulations for FP, PS, NU, and all R district. Section 415.420 sign regulations for all C and M districts, section 415.430 subdivision information signs, and section 415.440 temporary signs, specifically for the purposes of considering possible changes to certain existing regulations to address comments and concerns from members of the public regarding their timeliness and applicability, and to review recent relevant legal developments regarding the same, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration tonight what it would consider the final draft relative to the city's new set of sign regulations. As you can see from the cover page associated with the draft letter of recommendation, this discussion started back in June of 2019, so almost 1 year ago. And through that process, the Planning and Zoning Commission has challenged Mr. Young, Mr. Newberry, and I to create a set of sign regulations that protects the city's unique character, but is reflective of the content neutral requirements associated with these representations that was established by an action of the United States Supreme Court. I would note, I believe Mr. Young has done a very good job of walking a very thin tightrope to get us to the point we are tonight. The letter of recommendation was presented on March 16th to the commission, and a discussion ensued thereafter. Two major items were requested for consideration before final action tonight. The first dealt with Architectural Review Board consideration of any sign that was being submitted to the Board of Adjustment for a variance. So on page 10 of the actual proposed ordinance, the Department of Planning has added new language that for the most part says any sign seeking a review and action by the city's Board of Adjustment must first be submitted to the city's Architectural Review Board for comments, suggestions, or recommendations. These comments, suggestions, or recommendations are not binding on the Board of Adjustment, but must be provided to it for consideration, and if not allowed by the members, justification provided therein. The reason for that second sentence in the regulation relates to the authority the Board of Adjustment has, which is, for all intents and purposes, cannot be appealed to any member, board, commission, committee, or city council. It goes directly to the St. Louis County Circuit Court. So from that perspective, I think it was appropriate to ensure that there was a provision that would acknowledge the authority of the board relative to architectural review. So that was the first change. The other is on page 33 and deals with temporary banners. And the example that was provided by Commissioner Helfrey, and it's Lafayette High School in the area around their track, where they have flags that represent the Lancer
and add character to the facility. The department's thought on this particular matter was that instead of saying you can't have them, that they may be treated as a site development plan almost, and therefore have to be presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission for consideration and action. As part of that particular regulation or proposed requirement, it states the action of the commission shall be based upon the determination of community benefits derived from such a display of temporary banners being authorized. So there is a bit of a standard associated with it, meaning there has to be a community benefit that's derived to Wildwood, and that community benefit has to be definable to 6 of the 10 Planning and Zoning Commission members. If not, then the additional banners would not necessarily be approved. It places the discretion and the decision onto the Planning and Zoning Commission, and for all intents and purposes, I believe that's the appropriate location. The mindset of 10 members of the community, one of which is the mayor, the other an elected city council member. So those are the 2 changes that were incorporated into the draft ordinance that was discussed on March 16th. And if those are acceptable to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the letter of recommendation in its current form is ready for final action.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. One question on the temporary banners. After we approve this, as it goes through its process, we're going to have to notify people of the change. How does that occur? I can see Lafayette High School just doing what they've always done and not bring anything to our attention until it's brought to their attention.
Well, certainly the high school is a unique set of circumstances. And as you know, several years ago, they were requesting the ability to display business banners, sponsors on their athletic fields, the fencing. Ultimately, the commission didn't support that in the format that the high school had requested. And to date, they've been very good at honoring that. So I think it's just a matter of communication, and certainly that's the responsibility of city team members, elected officials, etc. But the department felt strongly that if there was a feeling on the commission's part that those banners add to the atmosphere of a high school, a middle school, or whatever the situation might be, that there ought to be a process to allow them to at least present it to a group of residents in the city, make their basically case. And then if there is a community benefit, then 6 of the 10 commission members have to support it. I knew of no other way without getting us into more what I would consider arbitrary approaches.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open this up for any comment from the commission. Commissioner Greg Nani.
Yes, I have 2 questions, I guess. One is, if this is passed as is, will Lafayette then have to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission for all of the flags that they currently have around their field, or will they not have to do so? And secondly, where do all of these, I guess they're Solo Cup, I guess you would call them signs that are in the fences at almost every school in the district, at least that I've seen around here, are they considered signs, or what are how do they fit into all of these regulations?
Via the chair, with his permission.
Yes, Mr. Vunich, go ahead.
Excuse me. Ms. Grignani, I would ask Mr. Young to comment on the grandfathering component.
As to any signs that are currently in place and are currently compliant with the city code as it exists today, that will remain after the passage of this bill, would qualify as non-conforming uses and could remain. Now, if they were ever destroyed, need to be replaced, or anything beyond standard maintenance, they would have to comply with the new requirements of the code.
So you're saying that both the Solo Cup images that are in the fences and the flags around Lafayette's athletic fields would then be okay unless they were changed in some fashion?
Assuming that, and I have not confirmed this, but assuming that they are currently compliant with the code, that would be correct.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the ones that are in the fences are compliant with anything, but, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Grignani, those displays in the fences around many of the schools, none of those have been authorized by the city.
I would have assumed so.
But to answer that particular question, Mr. Young and the department did include a definition of a temporary sign. And it's basically a banner, pennant, poster, or advertising display constructed of paper, cloth, canvas, plastic sheet, or other like materials that appears to be intended or is determined by a code official to be displayed for a limited period of time. So I actually think the displays in the fences could be considered a temporary sign for the purposes of our definition. And again, I would ask Mr. Young to either say, no, you're being stupid, Director of Planning, or that's kind of close, or we could do something different.
Well, I certainly would never say the first, at least to your face. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. But no, I think that's a reasonable interpretation of the code.
So Mr. Chair, again, to answer Commissioner Grignani's question, I think we would have to contact the schools and ask them to submit information regarding these displays if this particular ordinance requirement is adopted, so that we could then make them legal and then allow them to exist.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Vunich, so if I'm hearing everyone correctly, it seems like the schools and churches and other entities like that will be the ones who have to follow these regulations. That's going to be where our issues are, not necessarily with commercial tracks.
Again, temporary banners covers all of the zoning districts contained in the zoning ordinance. So conceivably, a commercial business could ask, a residential use could ask. Typically, they're institutional in nature. But at the end of the day, it has to be presented to the 10 Planning and Zoning Commission members, 6 of which have to weigh, is there enough community benefit to accommodate what is being proposed? I still believe that's the best approach to preserve the character of Wildwood. I don't believe any commission member or anyone in council chambers would want to have the character of Wildwood changed by too many signs. And that's probably one of the quickest and simplest ways to change character, to allow too many signs. But again, if there's an approach that I'm missing relative to the Lafayette High School situation or the Solo Cups in the fences, I'd be glad to hear what it is. And between Mr. Newberry, Mr. Young, and I'm sure we could come up with a solution.
So I'll follow with my first question. I try to state this correctly. As far as temporary signs, it's going to come to planning and zoning commission and then work its way towards council. There wouldn't be a issue where staff would approve it directly.
No. In this particular instance, the Planning and Zoning Commission would have the authority, and the city council would only see it on appeal.
Okay, so if we would approve it, then it's a done deal then basically at that point, unless it's appealed.
Correct. And the
Okay,
appeal process is laid out as part of the site development review requirements.
okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Mayor Boland?
Yeah, I was just going to say in follow-up, you know, relative to the thought through process that Joe just delineated, specifically as to the high school, it seems to me that it takes a lot of the issues and balances them very well as best as can be done in this type of situation with the signs. And so I just wanted to say, number one, thanks for doing that. And I think that it's probably the best option that's out there with respect to dealing with these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, this is a roll call vote. Can I have a motion to approve the recommendations? Commissioner Helfrey,
I'll second it.
and second by Commissioner Greg Nani. Mr. Newberry, it's a roll call vote on this one.
Commissioner Levitt. Commissioner Cohn,
Cohn,
Commissioner Cohn, your vote on the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Gragnani,
Yes,
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Werther,
Aye.
Mayor Boland.
Abstain.
Okay, that passes. On the agenda, we have no items for new business, no items for site development plan, and it looks like we're wrapped up here. Mr. Bunich, do you have any closing comments, or Mr. Newberry?
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Newberry first if he has any, but I just have a couple.
Mr. Newberry?
Mine would be if the commission has any feedback on tonight's meeting and how it proceeded using Zoom, if you could email that to me and Joe and Kathy, so we can do better next time.
I think this worked really well for our first attempt.
I agree.
Kudos to you guys.
Ms. Depler, I'll pass those on to the appropriate people, but it's not the one that's speaking now. But thank you.
Mr.
Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, before we leave the sign regulations, I do want to thank you again. It took us almost a year to get to this point tonight. A lot of your input was very, very good. It helped make the ordinance better. And I think we've positioned Wildwood well for the future relative to signs. So thank you again. And along those same lines, thanks so much for being flexible tonight, for trying this, keeping the wheels of government moving despite the pandemic and the impact it's having here in Wildwood, the St. Louis region, Missouri, the United States, and the world. You should be commended and pat yourself on the back. We looked the virus in the eye and we were able to conduct business. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Mayor Boland, second by Commissioner Beatty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain? nays. So we're adjourned. Thank
Stay
you,
healthy,
everybody.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Everybody be
Night,
safe.
everyone.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.